Good morning, students. So happy Tuesday. Today for math, we're actually going to go over 2 pages as we learn about ratios for the first time. So you will have page 60 and 61 assigned today because page 60 is actually very basic and very simple. So what we're going to do is after you complete your review exercises and speed drills, you're going to start comparing numbers as ratios. And this is what that means. So for the instructions, it says that a ratio compares two numbers or groups of objects. And here is an example. So here we see 3 circles and 4 squares. And the way that you would say that ratio is for every 3 circles, there are 4 squares. So if there were a bunch of circles and a bunch of squares and you didn't know exactly how many, there were one way to describe it would be through a ratio. And in this case, 3 to 4. For every 3, there's 4. The ratio can be written in the following ways. And these are all ways that you can write a ratio. You can write it 3 to 4, like the first number 2, and then the second number, and then 3:4 and 3/4, like a fraction. And each of these is read as 3 to 4. So, for example, let's say there were 2 girls in your classroom and there were 8 boys in your classroom. You can say for every 1 girl, there are 4 boys. That would be an example of a ratio that you may use or have seen in real life. So page 60 here is very simple. It wants you to write all of these ratios as a fraction. So all you're going to do is read these ratios and they're all meaning the same thing, whether it has the word 2, whether it has the colon, they all mean ratio. So all you're going to do is actually put the first number on top of the bottom number as a fraction. So here for the first sample, it says 5 nickels to 3 dimes. So all you would do is go like this. For sample 2, 9 horses to 4 cows, you would just do this. And that's exactly what you're going to do for all of these. It's just to warm up, just to practice how to write your ratios as fractions. So for all of these, the number on top is the first number going over the second number as a fraction. So because this is so simple, we're also going to go on to page 61 where we're going to learn a little bit more about proportions and percentages. And here for page 61, so we're still on Tuesday, we're just continuing on with the ratios because page 60 was so simple and basic. So for this page, you do have to complete your review exercises and speed drills because they're very simple. We just have some more basic subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division. There aren't any decimals there. So definitely do complete those review exercises and your speed drills. And then we're going to learn a little bit more on how to compare numbers as ratios. So here it says equal ratios show the same comparison. So what that means is the ratio of squares to circles is, and it has 4/6 or 2/3. So all that means is to say is for every 4 squares, there are 6 circles, but also for every 2 squares, there are 3 circles. So it pretty much means the same thing. 2 equal ratios can be written as a proportion. So what that means is you can have 4/6, like for every 4 squares there are 6 circles, or you can write it for every 2 squares there are 3 circles. Proportions can be solved the same way as finding equivalent fractions. So we're going to need to multiply or divide just to find our proportions below. And it may seem a little tricky at first, but I'm going to help you. And the first thing I'm going to do actually before I show you how to multiply and divide these is give you a little bit more of a visual example. So I know that it used squares and circles, but let's try something new just to get a better understanding. So let's try a different shape, and hopefully this will help a little bit more. So here let's do, I want to do hearts. So I'm going to actually do 3 hearts. And then I'm going to do 5 stars here. So the way you would write this ratio is pretty easy, right? You would write 3 to 5, or 3 to 5, or 3 to 5. Simple. However, let's draw some more hearts and stars and see how we can compare a ratio and find a proportion. So this is what I'm going to do this time. Okay, so here we also have, for every 3 hearts that I drew 5 stars. So if I keep adding them, I could also say that for every 9 hearts, I have 15 stars. For every 6 hearts, I have 10 stars. So all of those ratios are correct. It just matters to what proportion. So we can say here, every time that Miss Jackie draws 3 hearts, she draws 5 stars, just like up here. So we could do 3 over 5. Or you can also say, for every time that Miss Jackie draws 6 hearts, she draws 10 stars. And you could do this. For every time that Miss Jackie draws 9 hearts, she draws 15 stars. So just notice that all of these are actually right. It just matters what proportion. And that's what we're going to do for our exercise for the day. So it may take a little bit of dividing or multiplying, and I'm going to show you how. So over here it says 2 to 4. So that means that for every 2 of something, you have 4 of something. But that can also mean that for every what? You have 8. So in this case, we have to multiply because we know that for every 2, let's just pretend we're doing squares and circles again. So for every 2 circles, we have 4 squares. Well, that means if we have 8 squares, we must have how many circles? Well, if we have 2 for every 4, then that means there must be 4 for every 8. And all I did was multiply that. And the way you do it is you do what number times 4 gives you 8. And it's 2. And I can draw it for you just in case, just to make sure. If we have 2 to 4, and it wants us to decide at what proportion. Well, if we have 2, let's do squares. 2 squares for every 4 circles, then of course, for every 8 squares, we're going to have 4 circles. For every 8 circles, we're going to have 4 squares. And it can keep going and going. We can say that for every 12 circles, we have 6 squares, and so on. So our answer for the first sample would be 4, because for every 2, we're going to pretend squares, we have 4 circles. That means for every 8 circles, we have 4 squares. And here for the next sample, we have a larger number on top. So we have to notice that we have, for example, 6, 2, 4. So we're not saying it as a fraction, we're saying it as a ratio. So it would be 6 to 4, that's what that would mean, is equal to what over 2? Well, if we know that for every 6 squares, we have just 4 circles, then if we were to cut that in half, because the bigger number's on top, then for every 2 circles, we would have how many squares? Well, we would have 3. And this is why. To have a visual. So let's pretend, not this one. So let's do over here, our ratio that it's giving us is 6 to 4, right? So, and it's giving us 6. 4 would be what proportion? Well, if we have 6 squares to every 4 circles, then that means for every 2 circles, we have 3 squares. So you don't actually have to draw it for every single ratio. What you're going to make sure and do is that you either multiply or divide. So it gave us 6 to 4, so we know that if 2 is half of 4, then it would have to be half of 6, and 3 is half of 6. And I know that all of this can seem a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it will be so much easier. So please let me know over Zoom if you need any help. Either way, I'm still going to go over it just a little bit today. So here for our language arts exercise for Tuesday, we are continuing practicing with adverbs. So there's nothing brand new to learn today. You're just going to continue underlining adverbs and drawing an arrow to the word that it modifies. So pretty much the same thing we were doing last week. We're just going to continue practicing. So just for number 1 through 14, you're going to underline all of the adverbs. Then draw the little mini arrow. And it says to the word it modifies. That could be another adverb. I'm just going to write a little trick here, little tip. Or it could be an adjective. So just keep that in mind. Here on Think E, you're going to change the adjectives to adverbs by adding ly. If the adjective ends with le, you drop the e and just add y. So pretty simple. Here we have the word, for example, wonderful. So you would add ly because it does not end with le. So you would just write wonderfully. I added the ly. So number 2 would be the same, but let's find one that ends in le, like it says. So for a word like terrible that ends in le, we would drop the e and add the y. So then we would end up with terribly spelled correctly. So this is just an example of each. If it doesn't end in le, you just add the ly. If it does end in le, then you drop the e and add a y. So 2 different examples here. You're going to use that method for all of these problems. Just a quick reminder before we go on to spelling, that we have reading today. We're going to be reading chapter 4 together live, and we're going to be going over our work packet as well. So here for chapter 4, we have confusion in the marketplace. So just be ready for Zoom because we're going to do our live reading session and discussion today. So here for our spelling for Tuesday. So we have a brand new list 19, and it is up on Spelling City. So what we're going to do first is go over all of the words, but then I'm going to explain how to complete this pattern word exercise because it may seem a little confusing at first, but then once you get it, you'll see it's quite easy. So our pattern words for this week are athlete, journey, freckles, attempt, orchard, shoulder, entertain, adjective, sculpture, aggravate, apostrophe, congratulate. Content words are senses, organs, physical, muscles, skeleton, anatomy, circulation. And our vocabulary words are fusion, transfusion, resignation, and resigned. So, I recommend that you do your definitions for your pattern words first. That way, you will have them ready before you complete your work for the week, and also your vocabulary words so you have them ready for tomorrow. So for this little pattern word exercise, it says to complete the exercises, sorting them by VCCV and VCCCV spelling patterns. And what does that mean? Well, simply what that means is vowels and consonants. So we all know our vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. So what you're doing is finding the words that have a vowel, consonant, 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 vowel, or vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. And this is what you have to do. I like to do them all right on this list, but I write small enough. If you have very large handwriting, then what I would suggest is that you write your words on a separate piece of paper before doing this. But here's what I do. So for example, we have the word athlete. So I'm going to go letter by letter and decide which ones are vowels and which ones are consonants. So A is a vowel, so I would go V, T, H, and L. Those are all consonants. E is a vowel, consonant, vowel. So I'm going to do this you're going to do it for all of them. I'm going to do it for a couple of them to show you. So here, journey. Well, J is a consonant. And then we have a vowel here for O, vowel for U, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. So once you're done identifying each letter for these words, you're going to notice some patterns. So for the word athlete, we have a VCCCV word here. Notice that. Here for journey, we actually have a VCCV word. So as you can see, I wrote really tiny. If you can't, just copy the list on a piece of paper. But that is how you find your patterns, just by vowels and consonants. So I know that for number 1, it wants the word that has both. So for right now, I'm going to skip number 1 because I haven't yet found the word that has both of these patterns in it. For numbers 2 through 6, though, it's VCCV words, so I can already write journey in number 2. And then for number 7 through 12, it wants the VCCCV word, so I know that for number 7 already, I can write athlete. And that's what you'll do. You'll just make the little codes under each word and then just put them where they belong. Just remember there is one word. I'll give you a hint. It's a long word. that has both of the patterns, and that one's going to go here for number 1. So my suggestion is skip number 1 first, do all of your coding, and then just match them. Put them in 2 through 6 or 7 through 12, just by their vowel and consonant patterns. And then here for content words, as you know, it's just putting in the correct content word and looking in the back for the definitions in the spelling dictionary when needed.